Sonic the Hedgehog. When some hear those words, they may think of a few different things. Fun platformer that rivaled Mario in the 90s, hit or miss 3D platformers, I know I just said a few off of that take, recolored Sonic characters being passed off as original characters, Christian Weston Chandler and Sonic 2, or even Mario and Sonic at the Olympics. No matter if you hate it or love it, everyone should be aware of how great Sonic 3 and Knuckles is. Sonic 3 and Knuckles may be my favorite platformer from the 1990s. It's fun, colorful, and very well in the eyes. It's a very enjoyable game as well. Even how it was released is incredibly interesting to me, the lock-on technology. Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I think, is a product of its time, and I don't believe another game is as interesting and as beautiful as Sonic 3 and Knuckles will ever be made again. Now, this video isn't a full depth in history of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. There are better people than me who have already made videos on that, but the work and thought that went into this game, into its release, is just amazing. Now, I'm taking a break from the formula here, but I want to talk about my relationship with these games before I get started with the history and development. When I grew up, the console I had from my early years was a Nintendo 64, where I spent most of my time, but the other was a PS2. On the PS2, I had a lot of games, but I just didn't know how to play them. Ultimate Spider-Man and the other Spider-Man games I just couldn't figure out, but what I did play a lot of was the collection games, such as the Intellivision Collection, the Activision Collection, and Sonic Mega Collection Plus. Sonic Mega Collection Plus was my first introduction to platformers. I spent many hours playing the first 3 Sonic games and the Game Gear games, plus Sonic Spinball and 3D Blast. Mean Bean Machine was also a game I spent a lot of time with. Pretty much anything that was unlocked from the beginning, I played. My favorite at this age was Sonic and Knuckles. My relationship with Sonic was just old platformers, and this idea stuck in my head for a long time until I watched YouTuber CyberShell, who will make videos for a few years and disappear for a bit. I saw the Sonic 2 bonus video and I really liked it, so then I saw the Sonic 3 complete video. Now, Sonic 3 wasn't my favorite until that point. I thought it was okay, and I didn't like how Sonic looked and I thought it was too hard. But after this video, I realized that there's much more to this game than I thought. I never knew you could play Sonic 3 with Sonic and Knuckles. This idea just blew me away. The idea of combining 2 games is just insane to me, and it led me down an obsession with the game. I was able to hunt down a cart of Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic 2. I still have my SNK cart, but I still need to find out where my Sonic 2 cart is. I also bought a Retro N3 to play these and my other games I had. Since for some odd reason I refused to use an emulator, when I had a PC at the time, so I don't know why I didn't do this, I decided to grind out Mega Collection on the PS2 till I unlock SN3K, which is Sonic 3 and Knuckles, on that game, which I swear was different, but you have to play both games separately 20 times, which is pretty lame. So after I did that, I played Sonic 3 and Knuckles to death and became a Sega fanboy. Sonic Mania was released right after I finished it, if I remember correctly, so I bought it on PS4 and then played the hell out of it. I enjoyed Sonic Mania a lot, and later I bought it on PC, since Sam, who used to run the channel with me, hijacked the PS4. On Steam, it says I last played this on January 21st of 2024, but I really don't remember playing this at all in 2024, but I played it a lot in 2022. I also bought Sonic Origins just to have it, and it was alright. The Sonic 3 port wasn't really good at all, and the music was different, which I'll talk about later. Since Sonic Origins, and the last time I beaten Mania, I haven't really played a Sonic game in about a year. In the time between beating Mania and Sonic Origins, so I think around 2018, I found a new obsession Sonic related, and that was Chris Chan, now going by Christine Weston Chandler, but also known as Quick, Kristen Weston Chandler, Ian Brandon Anderson, Solid Chris, Little C, Ricardo Chandler, IPA Chandler, Natalie Portman, CPU Blueheart, Sonic 2, Chris Chan Sonic 2, Chris Chan Prime, and Jesus Christine Weston Chandler Sonic 2 Prime. Like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Chris Chan is a product of its time. There will never be another person like Chris Chan, no matter how hard you try. Chris, now Christine, is a highly functioning autistic adult who, through over 20 years of internet trolling and arguably horrendous parenting, culminated in a horror show of a life. He's arguably the most documented person to ever live. The Chris Chan story is not something I have time to talk about in this video, but if I did, this video would be over 10 hours long. If you want to get into Chris Chan, I recommend the Let Me Tell You About video. This is the first video I saw about him, and the Sachucho, I believe that's how you say his name, video on him. In total, these videos are about 2 hours long, so if you can waste an afternoon learning about this character, you can do that. Now, if you have 70 plus hours of free time, I'd recommend the Geno Samuel Comprehensive History series, but look into Chris after this video is complete. Once Chris was arrested and behind bars, I fell out of it and I just found new hobbies. Until I saw Sonic 3 Angel Island Revisited. This came out in 2022, which I thought was a lot earlier, but I was finally able to replay Sonic 3 and Knuckles into widescreen, which to me, widescreen 60 frames a second is the greatest thing to ever exist, so I had to pick the game back up. If you've ever watched older videos on this channel, such as the food reviews, I used a lot of Sonic music just because how good it was. The ones I can think of the best are Food Review 9 and Food Review 5, which both those tracks will be used in this video. If you want to watch these, number 9 is the Crazy Calzone from Little Caesars, and number 5 is Goldfish. Not anything insane, just Mickey Mouse goldfish in a single serving plastic bag, the type you put in a toddler's lunchbox. I was really pushing it when it came to food reviews. I was really pushing that medium ahead. With all the background information out of the way, I think it's now best to talk about the very interesting history and development of this game, hitting on some key details I just really want to talk about. As I said before, there are a few topics I want to touch on here, such as Michael Jackson's involvement, debug menus, McDonald's Happy Meals, you'll learn, lock-on technology, and the Sonic games up to this point. The music for this game had Michael Jackson's involvement, although he was never credited for his work on this game. The credit went to Brad Buxer, a close associate of Jackson, and I believe he was his producer. This all started when Jackson enjoyed the previous game, Sonic 2. He liked it so much that he decided to get in contact with the Sonic team and to do work on the third installment of the franchise. Jackson and Buxer got to work. Jackson had Buxer make many of the tracks, and Jackson actually soon left the project after just hearing what the system sound chip did to the music. He was very disappointed with the quality and stepped down from the project, wishing to be uncredited. This was all speculation until in 2009, when an interview Brad Buxer essentially confirmed Jackson's involvement in the game. Legal issues with the Jackson estate prohibited the use of several tracks in future releases of the game. This is why in some ports of Sonic 3, several tracks are just replaced. Notable games that include this replacements include the original PC port of the game and the new release Sonic Origins. There will be a video linked below that is just far more in depth, and they do a lot better job than what I just gave you guys in this little segment. Sonic games have very easily accessible debug menus. Each involves a player usually inputting the specific code event, gamepad inputs, or using a sound test. Sonic 3's level select has some zones out of order, and a few zones are not even in the game. This is because Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles are supposed to be a single game, which I've already talked about. Due to time constraints and the McDonald's tie-in, which I'll be talking about next, this game also had to be split in two, and they were released 6 months apart. The debug menus also show the original intended order of the zones via the level select. The debug menus in this game are very fun to play with, often including various items that are now available to the player and the ability to spawn in badniks and other items. As stated earlier, the game was massive, and there was also a McDonald's tie-in. To release something before the McDonald's tie-in, they wanted to get it out. I believe Izuka, that may be a Nintendo rep. This is unscripted. This part, he was like he stated that it was the greatest honor to be in a McDonald's tie-in meal. Crazy honor. So Sega decided to cut the game in half and work on the other half to polish things up. Although the tie-in wasn't the main reason the game was released how it is today, it is a contributing factor. The toys released here are also deemed collector's items today. As stated about 20 times before, this game was released in two halves. The first release is Sonic 3, and the other is Sonic & Knuckles. This is where we get Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Both games on here are just fine on their own. In Sonic & Knuckles, you can't save. The Sonic & Knuckles card also had a port on the top of the cartridge where you plug Sonic 3 into it. This is how you play the entire game as one cohesive experience. There are some differences when the game is combined, such as a few music tracks just being a little bit different. Not anything big, not its own music, like smaller ones. There's very small stage design differences and there's some color changes with some sprites. Now, Sonic 3 wasn't the only game to work with lock-on technology. Sonic 2 worked as well, and Sonic 2 could play through the entire game as Knuckles, which is a new and fun way to do it. Sonic 1 didn't have any new super fun ways to play the game. Instead, you get to play I think it's 131 million versions of the Blue Spear stages. Doing this with any other game grants you the exact same result, but I don't think it is as many special stages. Lock-on technology only exists because this game was too big for one cartridge, which is really cool. The Sonic games were going through a very natural progression of improvement up until this point. Everything until this point was Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic CD, Sonic Hedgehog 2, and there's a few spin-offs, but that doesn't really relate to these mainline games. Sonic 1 is the most primitive of the game. There was speed, but it was very limited. The first zone of the game showed off the absolute best, but the next several zones paled in comparison to the speed of the first. There were a few instances here or there of some nice speed, but there wasn't a lot of speed. Each zone also had 3 acts, which each one would be about 2-3 minutes long for the average player. The zone ended in a final boss battle with Eggman, the antagonist of the game, turning animals into robots and doing his bidding, which follows essentially the plot of every single Sonic game if you really get down to it. The game was very solid on its console. The Sega Genesis was a competitor to the NES at the time, and this game sold very well and caused many debates in school playgrounds about who's better, Mario or Sonic. The second game is where there's kind of a fork in the road. So Sega had created the Sega CD, which is an add-on for the already popular Genesis. Now this allowed users to play games via CD on the machine. With Sonic being Sega's mascot, it was obvious that they were going to make a game for the system including Sonic. Now, Sonic and CD involved much of the same story as Sonic 1 with some new movements. Sonic CD had the spin dash and super peel out, both movements that increases Sonic speed. Sonic CD also had time travel. The US and Japanese soundtracks were also very different. Now, my first experience with Sonic CD was the Christian Whitehead port. It was a modern port of the game made by ROM Hacker, which was published by Sega. This is how I first played the Sonic CD game. The port added a modern spin dash, widescreen, 60 frames per second, some of the greatest things ever. He also worked on Sonic ports for 1 and 2, and he also pretty much created Sonic Mania in 2017 with the help of a few others who I don't remember their names. A Sonic 3 port was in the works, but it was later turned down by Sega, possibly due to legal issues with the music and stuff like that. Now, Sonic 2 was being worked on at the same time by Sega. The story was much of the same, new movements were introduced again, such as the spin dash was different than it was in the original CD port, and a sidekick named Tails. Tails was the second player of the game, and he could fly. Playing as just Tails is considered easy mode, as he can fly, and Sonic 2 also changed the 3-act structure of the game so far. Now there are 2 acts per zone, with the second having a boss battle. Sonic 2 also removed the ground speed cap that was in Sonic 1, making the game much faster and more satisfying to play, with some sections even like roller coasters. The improvements of the franchise just culminated in the perfect third game. You may ask, what's changed from Sonic 2 to Sonic 3? Well, to start, you can now save the game, which I think is amazing. Being able to put the game down after a while was a pretty good perk. Also, Sonic has a mid-air ability called the Insta-Shield, but it acts more like an attack, which is in line with its name in Japan, which is the W spin attack. Now, W is used to mean double in Japanese, so it just means double spin attack, which it sort of does. It expands your hitbox a bit, making bosses a little bit easier, and it gives you an invisibility frame. The structure of acts was changed again as well, with each act being a little bit longer and every single act having a boss to fight. The first act has an easier boss, usually just a robot and not Eggman, whereas the second boss is Eggman. This game also has 13 stages with 4 different ways to play: Sonic alone, Sonic and Tails, Tails, and Knuckles, who for the majority of the game is the antagonist. Special stages is also changed in this game. In Sonic 1, you had to float around a gemstone area and collect Chaos Emeralds. You can only enter this if you had over 50 rings at the end of the stage. Sonic 2 had you jump into checkpoints to do a half-pipe 3D stage, which is my least favorite out of all the series. Collecting the Chaos Emeralds does something here, at least, where when you get all of them, you can obtain Super Sonic, which makes the game comically easy. To activate him, you need 50 rings and a jump, where every second you'll lose a ring until you run out, losing Super Sonic. This isn't really an issue though, since rings are very abundant in these games. Rings are also how you stay alive in these games, in case you didn't know. As long as Sonic has at least one ring, getting hit will not kill you, and you can abuse this mechanism at boss battles, just do spam attacks and just keep collecting the rings and keep hitting them and to keep doing spam attacks. It's a great cycle, very balanced. Sonic CD also had different special stages. You have to chase UFOs in a 3D environment. Now, these are okay. I think they're a bit hard, but they're just fine. The special stages I think here are the best the series has to offer, where when you find a giant ring, you can enter into it and collect blue spears around the map while avoiding the red spear and bumpers. Yet the yellow spear also sends you flying across the map. The stage will also speed up as you play, so it's best to try to collect these blue spears as fast as possible. The music here was also an improvement from the first two, and out of all Sonic games, this game has the best music. After all, what good is a Sonic game if it doesn't have good music? Since I love bringing up my father in these reviews, as I was gathering footage for this review, he asked if I was playing Sonic. He also said that the music in these games was the best. The music in these acts also have small changes. Act 1 is usually slightly different from Act 2 and does not really subtract or add to the mood. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. In the first zone of the game, the music has a tropical type feel, but in Act 2, once the island is set ablaze by Eggman, the Act 2 music has a sort of chase vibe going on to it. It makes the mood of the level being, look at this cool island, to some asshole just set this island on fire, I need to stop him. And it really makes it feel something, and it makes you feel really involved with the game. The backgrounds also change in each stage, making it feel like you're traveling around an entire island, not just playing in isolated areas. Most of the stages also have transitional pieces, where you can see the next stage and know where it is in relation to the other stages. My favorite is how Hydro City Zone, sorry about that, someone's typing away right now in the comments, my favorite is how Hydro City Zone is directly under Angel Island Zone, making the game feel like a full world without having a hub world like in the Mario games, for example. Now, I think that a lot of the background information is out of the way now. I think it's time to talk about the game itself. And since the zones and events within each make the game very memorable, it's best to start with those. The game starts with Sonic and Tails on their airplane, which I forget the name of, and I'm not bothered enough to look it up for this review, right after the end of Sonic 2. Sonic goes Super Saiyan and speeds onto the island, where he's punched by Knuckles, the antagonist for the majority of the game. He steals the Chaos Emeralds and he runs off. After this encounter, you get control of Sonic and you speed through the stage as you usually would in any other Sonic game, where in this, you actually can find a lot of the special stages very early on to get the Chaos Emeralds back. Soon you see the first mini-boss of the stage, who sets the jungle on fire. Now, you can see how Eggman is destroying the island. You feel very enticed to stomp him. You continue through the stage as it burns up, and you also finish off the mini-boss. Now that you realize what has happened to the stage, you continue to travel through the inferno that you indirectly caused. You continue to speed through loops and tunnels, and what I just love about stage design in this game is that typically there's 3 layers each stage, with the bottommost being the slowest, the middle being pretty average, and the top being the fastest. To get to the top of the stage, you usually need to wait for some floating platform or jump at the right time. Now, this precision pays off since you can finish the stages much faster. Near the end of the stage, an airship starts bombing the island and you need to outrun it. Soon you see Dr. Eggman flying in a flying machine, flying behind the trees. He eventually fights you in a waterfall, using the water as a wall between you and him. After you defeat him, Knuckles shows back up, and he sends you to the underground zone called the Hydro City Zone. Hydro City Zone is the first water zone in the game, and I'm glad it's gotten out of the way rather quickly. Besides being a water zone, you don't need to touch water really that much. If you progress to the upper layers, you can avoid the water altogether, which I think is amazing. I hate water stages and platformers, so it's nice I just avoid all the water. The music here is also really good and adds to the funky feeling of being in an underwater city, possibly lost to time. The setting established in this zone is beautiful, and the parallax scrolling with the background, changing depending where you're at, height-wise, is amazing and very immersive. Even seeing the water levels is just a very cool thing to look at. The mini-boss for the zone is the Big Shaker, who will jump down into the water with his rockets, and then spin the water making you lose control of Sonic. The mini-boss isn't hard and sets the tone for the next act. This zone also feels like a different zone once you hit Act 2. There is a chase sequence via a wall coming in to crush you, but after you make it out, you'll already see the new elements in this act. There are rotating pillars that you have to navigate through. Also, there are blue half-pipes that will send you around the act. There are speed-up modules, which I don't know the proper name for them, so I'm calling them speed-up modules here, which will involve a hand grabbing you on a spinning gear. Also, there are several sections where you're going so fast you can just run on water. You encounter Knuckles here again, who sends you to the boss chamber. This boss is called the Screwmobile, and Eggman will drop bombs on you onto the surface, causing the water to shoot you up right into the air. Eggman will also make a screw of water, hence the name Screwmobile, that will suck you up. But it'll also act as a platform for you to stand on and hit Eggman. This stage ends with a geyser, sending you to the Marble Garden zone. Marble Garden is one of my least favorite zones in the game, but my personal feelings aside, I still need to give it justice. The Marble Garden is a Greco-Roman type zone. The foliage here is probably the same as the foliage in Angel Island zone, just the outskirts. The stage starts pretty normally, with you sliding down a slope onto the stage. I think the first act here is very chaotic. There are a lot of giant rings here, so it's pretty easy to get a bunch and maybe even get Supersonic early. This stage I feel like is a lower point in the game. This stage has a lot of spiky balls going up or down or left or right. The first act is pretty tame. There are these annoying spinning tops that you have to run on and get to some parts of the act which require the spinny top. The mini-boss first act is the tunnel ball. The mini-boss isn't really that super interesting. The second act in the zone is far more interesting, where, several times, you had to escape from the zone from falling in on itself. There are also blue spears you need to use to spin dash on, and the pulleys you have to grab up onto to reach some parts of the stage a lot easier. The boss battle here is very unique and I do enjoy it. The Dromobile is the boss here. Tails will carry you around and you need to jump onto Eggman to damage him. Besides the first act, this zone is alright. I'm not a big fan of the colors here or the general aesthetic of the stage, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. After Marble Garden, Tails drops you off at the Carnival Night Zone. As the name suggests, this zone is a carnival, but it also has some aspects from the previous 2 games in their casino/carnival zones. This zone reminds me of Spring Yard and Casino Night combined, since there's bumpers all over the atmosphere of the stage and stage design, and the atmosphere just really reminds me a lot of both of these. What I feel here is, like, when I play this, I feel a loss of control. Since the bumpers and the hot air balloon things and the balloons, I don't know what these are called, but they can throw you around the entire stage. The first act here is pretty tame. It isn't a crazy experience, but I did get stuck at a few bumpers that took me a while to break free of. The boss in this act also isn't the greatest. It's called the Bowling Spin, and I don't know if there's actually a specific strategy to beat him. I died a few times, and I just summed it up to chance. Besides the poor mini-boss, this act is pretty good. Alright, so I'm back. I'm adding this in because after I did the Knuckles run, which you guys learned about at the end of this, spoiler alert, I actually figured out how to beat this boss. So you just got to keep jumping on him, and the little rotatey thing will actually attack, like hit him. I had no idea how you got the thing to be open. That's why I died so many times. But besides that, this is a stage. I am sorry for that glaring oversight. Big mistake on my part. And this will lead into Carnival Zone Act 2. This act is really much of the same thing. There's a few new zone concepts that are introduced, such as the funnels that you can spin around down on, and the Barrel of Death. Now, I will be bashed in the comments if I don't give opinion on the infamous Barrel of Death, so I gotta do it. The Barrel of Death is a barrel that you control whether it goes up or down. That's pretty much it. Now, a lot of people had trouble with this since it isn't explicitly stated how to move this barrel around. But to their defense, no other barrel in this game, to my knowledge, can be controlled by the player like this. I think it's stupid that some people count this as a big turn-off for the game. I feel like it could just be solved by mashing buttons at a point of utter frustration and causes the player to think, what the hell am I supposed to do? Once they figure it out by pressing up or down the D-pad, they'll probably say to themselves, I am a complete idiot for not figuring that out. Much like I did when I was first stuck here at the barrel years ago. You also encounter Knuckles here again. He turns the light off. He just knocks out the power, but you can turn him back on. Besides the barrel, the boss for the stage is Eggman and the Gravity Mobile, I believe it's called, which is incredibly easy with the Insta Shield. Now after this zone, there is a fork in the road. Originally, the next zone was Flying Battery, and this was a last minute change, since it's still in the level select, and a McDonald's tie-in talked about earlier had Flying Battery on the bags and the Happy Meal Kingdom. Instead, you're sent to Ice Cap Zone. Ice Cap Zone, to me, is a high point in the game. Act 1 starts with Sonic snowboarding down the mountain, then you're dropped inside the Ice Caverns. Now this little segment does not really add to the gameplay, but because you really don't control Sonic during this, you can jump, but that's about it. But it really it makes the zone a lot cooler than it already is. These Ice Caverns include platforms on chains that you need to spin dash into as you move using your kinetic energy. There are also small icebergs you can use to avoid other spikes and other harmful objects. They can also break walls. The badniks here are really annoying, I think, since most of them can freeze you, slowing the game down. The mini-boss for Act 1 is the Big Ice Dust, which he just throws a bunch of ice blocks at you, and he also protects himself with these. It's not a very challenging mini-boss. This act is mostly the same, it just takes place outside the cavern now. I do really enjoy Ice Cap Zone. I think it has great music, and it's just an all-around fun stage. I don't understand how there's just an Arctic waste on a tropical island, but I'm not the game designer, so I'm not sure how they were able to pull that off, keeping it continuity-wise. The boss for this zone is Eggman inside the Freezer Mobile. I think this boss is a real challenge, and I decided to unlock Supersonic to beat him. I don't enjoy being frozen. My classic spam the boss and hope you collect a ring in the process doesn't exactly work in this boss since you're always frozen. Besides that, I think this zone's really good, and it leads right into the next zone. Launch Base Zone is a bit harder than the rest of the stages so far. It just makes perfect sense since this is the final zone in the original Sonic 3, playing it alone, of course. The level layout on Sonic 3 alone is much harder with Eggman monitors and pretty tough spots. You can see the Death Egg in the background, showing the player how high the stakes are now. It's an amazing stage, it makes you feel how crucial it is that you win, since Eggman is minutes away from launching the egg. The boss here is a Twin Hammer, who isn't very tough. I just spam him every time I have to beat him. Act 2 adds some more stuff to the level, such as an underwater portion and being able to enter the water pipes and just being thrown around somewhere else. There are also elevators around the map that transport you around, which were here in Act 1, but I didn't mention them. It's an all-around great act. The boss here is Eggman once again in the ball shooter, but I just spam him with Supersonic here. You also see Knuckles here again slowing you down. The next two bosses are Sonic 3 exclusive, but I do enjoy playing them in Sonic 3 Angel Island Revisited, so I turned it back on since this port is just amazing. Next two are the Beam Shooter and the Big Arm. The Big Arm is in a Knuckles run, I may add. The Beam Shooter and the Big Arm are just fine. Big Arm has some great music and it wraps this half of the game up very well. After this, the Death Egg falls and you're now inside the Sonic and Knuckles portion of the game. Now, if you are an insane person, or just dumb, you can stop playing Sonic 3 and just play Sonic and Knuckles. Now, I don't know why you would though. SNK alone feels like you're playing DLC without the base game. There's no saving, or Tails, and you gotta get all the Chaos Emeralds again. The proper way to play, like I said earlier, is playing Sonic 3 and SNK and continuing where you left off. SNK adds 7 new zones and a final boss stage, only if you collect all the Chaos Emeralds. Also, so this half just isn't comically easy, they add 7 more Chaos Emeralds, called the Super Emeralds. they let you turn into Hypersonic, who's just completely overpowered. Hypersonic hasn't been in the series since this game, and it's unfortunate, since it's very fun to use and makes the rest of the game very easy. With all that stated, I think it's time to dive right into the next stage, Mushroom Hill. Mushroom Hill Zone is very easy, considering it is technically the second first level. The first act is very tame. If you collected all the Chaos Emeralds before this, you can now enter the Hidden Palace Zone early from the giant shiny rings. Your Chaos Emeralds are taken from you. You can now choose what emerald you want to obtain by playing harder Blue Spirit stages. Knuckles is also back here, and he's actually here twice in the zone. First seeing him when you travel to the level, exiting the area where the giant ring is. The rest of the stage is, as I said, quite tame. There are these vines that can grab onto you, and you need to spin dash out of their grips. The mini boss here is the lumberjack boss named Hey Ho. I think this name is dumb, but I think Lumbertron or something would have been a lot better. But that's just me. The mini boss is pretty easy, and I like it. I think he's very iconic to me. This is what I grew up seeing a lot, since I only liked playing Sonic and Knuckles when I was a kid. And this also leads right into the next act. In Act 2, the level's colors are actually swapped later on stage. Since Knuckles he uses a wind machine to turn it into autumn. It's a nice color change in the zone. It's pretty much the same. Near the end, the zone turns into like a winter wasteland, but not really winter, more like just the grass is gray and it's most likely dead. The boss for this stage is Eggman in the Jetmobile, which is probably my favorite boss in the game. You have to chase him through like a 2.5D runway where you need to avoid spiky balls and the fire from the jets going from Eggman's machine. This zone's just amazing. I just think it's one of my favorites in the game. I think this stage is beautiful. That's probably the easiest way to put it. After you beat Eggman, the flying battery ship flies overhead and Sonic jumps on to the ship, and the next zone begins. Flying Battery is also one of my favorite zones in the game. It's in an airship and it has some fun elements within the zone. There are the sliding things that can throw you across the ground and give you a lot of speed, and the general aesthetic of the zone is very cool. The music of the zone is also really good. You don't see Knuckles here, but what you do see is pretty cool as well. There are magnets on the ceilings that grab magnets and platforms up, except for you, but it does do it in Sonic Mania. Everything about this stage is badass. The mini boss here is actually a fake out. It's a capsule, and the same one at the end of each zone, but it's called the Gapspool. Crazy name, isn't it? You don't directly damage this boss, but you have to make him hit himself, and I think it's an interesting way to wrap up the act. Act 2 is also much of the same. There are a few new elements here, like the balls on the chains that will move you around with the stage. It's hard to explain, but you can definitely see it on screen if I edited this properly. The ending of the stage is a little different. First, you encounter Eggman in a small boss zone where you get the laser damages to the airship. Then, as the ship is what I can assume falling apart, you have to race to the top and fight Eggman in the Hangmobile. This boss is also pretty easy. He shoots fire vertically, and you need to attack him when he starts circling the platform. You'll know if you play. All around this zone is really good, but it drops you off in probably one of my least favorite types of zones or stages in any game possible. And you probably know what I'm talking about if you played the game, or if you haven't played the game, if you've seen my previous videos and you know my disdain, my absolute disdain for this type of stage, zone, area, whatever you want to call it. You know. I hate desert stages. I feel like every game I've played so far has some sort of sand-involved stage, and this game is no different. And to make it worse, it's Egyptian themed, something I despise even more. Nothing against Egypt, I'm so sick of seeing the pyramids and just desert themes, and every desert has to involve a pyramid. You know, there are deserts on Earth without pyramids, preferably the, not the Egyptian desert clearly, but the New Mexico desert, the Mongolian desert, you know, all these other deserts that do not have pyramids. I don't know why they always go for a pyramid. I think it's so cliche. I'm getting very off track. Sometimes, you know, I can defend this area. I'm gonna get back on the script here. Like in Sunset Sands and Beetle Adventure Racing, where the setting doesn't just ruin the feel of the area because the stage there makes up for it. But I just can't with this zone. This zone includes these ramps that you just slide right down, and you can't really do much on it. And they're extremely hard to control yourself on. They're sand pits, they're sand columns, and it's just incredibly boring and frustrating. I feel that most of the stage is just waiting around, and it's incredibly boring. This is a stage I think about when I want to play the game, but once I start thinking about this stage, I'm like, I don't really want to play this game anymore. Now, thankfully, everything after this is much better, and it's definitely a high point in the game for me. Now, the mini-boss here is a golem, who you need to have, he needs to jump to the sand pit. It's an okay battle. I mean, the first time around, people probably have no idea what the hell to do, but I've seen enough guides on the game when I was younger to know exactly what to do here, so the boss isn't really that interesting anymore. Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Act 2. because I don't want to make another whole separate recording for this stage. As you can tell, this part of the stage is very off the script here, because my disdain for this stage is very high. Act 1 ends with a pyramid rising from the ground. If there's anything I hate more than sand stages with the eventual, you know what I'm going at. Act 1 ends with a pyramid rising from the ground. You probably guessed what you're going to do with this pyramid. You're going to enter the pyramid. Now, I don't like this pyramid either. Like, the pyramid in Mario 64 was okay. This just isn't that good. I really do not enjoy this act at all. Now, you actually turn the lights off and you release a bunch of ghosts. Now, over time, the lights will start to dimmer and the ghosts will start spawning in. And luckily, the ghosts, like, I was not hit by a ghost in a single time for this playthrough, but I remember being hit before when I was younger. Now, to get rid of the ghosts, you gotta turn the lights back on, which are, you gotta hang on these little handles on the ceiling. In certain areas are there, and you can turn them back on. There's also a lot of these push block timers that will open a door. Now, this isn't a problem, though, since it requires you to be quite fast with the game. But as the stage keeps going, they start to become pretty annoying. Because you go to one area, okay, just push block. Oh, that's a cool. You probably think, oh, that's pretty cool. First time around, oh, that's nice. New gimmick. Oh. You do it a second time, like, oh, you're doing that again, okay. And you just keep doing it the whole stage. You're like, oh my goodness. Now, the most memorable part of this stage to me, and it's infamous, is the infinite slide section, where you must jump onto a different slide to get to the new stage. That's really about it. The boss here is Eggman, once again, go figure. It's the Egg Golem. It's not a very hard boss, and I don't think it's very memorable. Thankfully, the next zone is a lot better than this. This poor excuse for a zone we got. Let me tell you. Oh my goodness. Lava Reef is a nice change of pace. We are back underground in what I can assume is under a volcano. It did this since you can see the death egg in the hole of the volcano, or the mouth, whatever you want to call it. Now, there are some bandits that are mining the area, and the one you see in the beginning is actually the mini-boss of this act. Everything about this zone is amazing. It's really fun and brings a lot of joy and amusement to me. Something I think all video games should strive to achieve. This is such a nice act. The second act here is very different. From the warm colors and the temperature to this act, to the flowing water lava falls and the breakable walls, to the mini-boss, where once you destroy, the zone takes on a very different approach to a cool down act, where the lava's cooled down, there's much less fire in this act. And this is the last act where you can actually find giant rings, being in Act 2. I didn't specify that. I want to let you guys know what I'm talking about. The boss of this act is Eggman again, but he uses the death egg to turn the heat back on, and you must run through a chase sequence and waiting for Eggman to destroy himself with the spiky balls. Everything about this zone is amazing. It also directly connects to the next zone, which is a single act, Hidden Palace. Now, Hidden Palace Zone is actually a place you've been to before. This is where you're teleported to after entering the giant rings. In the second half of the game. I think it's odd since that you're already here. I don't know why Sonic can't just teleport to like the next stage after this, after he collects a Super Emerald. Thinking about this kind of ruins the flow of the game. But if they did do it, it will definitely ruin the flow of the game. Also, you gotta think, Sonic has no idea where he is when he teleports here, so it does make sense that he doesn't just keep running around. You can finally fight Knuckles here, which isn't a very hard fight, but it's weird. It's really weird fighting another playable character, but it works pretty well. There's also a mural of the final zone in the game, which you can get to if you have the Chaos Emeralds. Eggman's here. He also steals a Super Emerald. Now, Knuckles, he's been working with Eggman this entire time, but he actually realizes, oh my goodness, I've been tricked, and he decides to help you. And he takes you to a teleporter that will take you to the next stage, Sky Sanctuary. Now, Sky Sanctuary is a semi-final zone. This is the second or last zone in the game, depending on who you play as. You enter and see the death egg behind you being just launched into the sky. Now, this zone is not very hard. It has a small boss rush at the end of Mecha Sonic, but after you beat him, you can enter into the death egg. Now, the death egg's an alright zone. I don't enjoy it that much, in all honesty. It's got some cool gimmicks, but by the time I get to this stage, from the high that was the last few stages, it's starting to wear off, and I get kind of burnt out when I get here. Now, picture this. Use your imagination. Imagine a buffet full of your favorite food. Now, in this buffet, think that it's starting at Lava Reef. and each act here is a dish of food. Now, this is in the game where you're at right now, entering Death Egg, is when you're starting to get a little full, and you don't really want any more. But something's begging you just to get a little bit more food, since it is unlimited, and it's free, maybe. So maybe you start to get mad or frustrated, asking yourself, can I just beat the game already? You don't think this feeling would arise, since in your other dishes, and as you're playing the game, you're thinking, oh my goodness, this game is the greatest of all time. Now, that's how I kind of feel at this point in the game. Now, I thought to myself, right before Sky Sanctuary, I wish there were more stages like this, like thinking of Lava Reef, Mushroom Hill, stages like that. And they're just so good, and you know a game's really good when you just want more out of it. But Death Egg Zone is kind of the definitive end of that feeling, and you just want it to be over. Now, Death Egg Act 1 has an alright mini-boss. It's just an eye in the wall that you have to hit at the right time. The second phase of the boss has the eye in the wall floating around with some platforms around them. Act 2 is much of the same, it leads you to the end of the game. The bosses of Act 2 are pretty average as well. The first involves you changing gravity around to make the boss hit himself. You need to fight Eggman's hands after that, and then you need to run and hit Eggman at the right time so you don't get incinerated by a laser, powered by the Super Emerald. Now, if you beat Eggman with all the Chaos Emeralds, the game just ends. Sorry, I misspoke. If you beat Eggman without all the Chaos Emeralds, the game just ends with a bad ending. But if you got him, you can play the true final zone, the Doomsday Zone, which is an amazing ending, and I feel it makes up for a lot of the bad feelings from Death Egg. Doomsday Zone is a chase throughout space. Eggman is guiding rockets at you, or you gotta guide them back into him. Like, that feels like the last several bosses we've really played in this half of the game involve a lot of make the boss hit himself, like the white hitting yourself bit, you know what I'm talking about. You also had to do this while avoiding asteroids. So why did I say asteroids? Avoiding asteroids and other rockets while also trying to collect rings so you keep supersonic. It's a great final boss, and it wraps up the game extremely well. After beating Eggman and just watching those amazing credits, you may think to yourself, man, I want to play that again. And you can, actually, in a very different way. So Knuckles, as I stated earlier, is a playable character in the game. And what's even better, you don't need to finish the game to play as Knuckles, but I always do it usually about a few hours after I finish the main game. In the post-credits, there's an Egg Robo who is still alive, and well, when you play as Knuckles, the Egg Robo is the main antagonist of the playthrough. You play for the same zones with some differences, some different boss challenges. In Card of Light, there actually is no second boss. Since this is the final part of the story, some zones are changed to portray the flow of time, such as the Death Egg not being in the launch space zone, or the Ghost Star being released in Sandopolis Act 2. In Sky Sanctuary as well, there's which is also the final zone here, you can see the Angel Island floating in the background, just as it was at the end of the Sonic run. The final boss here is Super Mecha Sonic, who uses Super Emerald to turn super. On my playthrough, I didn't feel like beating him. I was extremely burnt out for playing this game for a few days straight, so I just gave up. But with all that done, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is complete. You've completed the game, congratulations. Now onto my final thoughts. Now, if you couldn't tell already, this video is just an excuse to talk about one of my favorite games. No matter what happens to this game, I'm still gonna like it. I'm still gonna completely just love it. In a lot of ways, I still like it a lot more than Mania. This game to me is like a 9.9 out of 10. Take out Sandopolis and it's an 11. I don't really think I need like a good, big, long final thoughts for this section of the game, since most of my final thoughts are already in the video that you just watched. Now, but there is something I need to talk about, and this is the reason why this final thoughts section is here. Now, hopefully, the 2% of you guys are still watching until the end. This is going to be my last big video for college charts. I have a 19 credit semester, which is it's normal, and I'm really not sure if I'm going to have time and enough time to really post these and work on these as much as I had this summer. Now think of like at least once a month, we're going to get like a Super Mario type review, like time-wise, with the rest being the smaller videos that I don't need to dedicate multiple hours out of a week to do so. There may be more videos about the other games I haven't talked about. I did just put a poll as I'm recording this about the next game, and you guys so far have voted Plants vs. Zombies 1. If that changes by the time this is out, and you guys will know what it will be in a few months. Shorts will still be continued to work on. Shorts have actually grown my channel a ridiculous amount. There's a good chance that if you're watching this, you got me from the shorts. Since it's quite low effort and it does bring new efforts into the channel, in a few months, you'll probably see this video also reused as a short. Probably January maybe, or I may try to get this one sooner. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. I had a blast making this. It was really, I had a nice excuse to finally sit down and play Sonic 3 and Knuckles again. That's really all I gotta say for this video. I hope you guys like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff, share it, I don't know. And I'll see you guys soon for the next video. When will that be? What will it be? I'm not sure, but you guys will know.